Welcome to the best of the Leon Charney Report. For over 2 decades, Leon Charney, one of the architects of the historic Camp David Peace Accords, has interviewed some of the most important figures in modern-day history. These interviews provide a window into some of the most significant events of the last 50 years. In this excerpt, taped in April of 1995, Leon Charney speaks with Ambassador Richard Butler, an expert on nuclear disarmament. Everything they spoke about 17 years ago can be put into the context of today's headlines.
If the ambassador here has his way, everybody would be disarmed. They'd have no problems. They'd be back to bayonets, though.
That's a really interesting point, Leon. Let's take that one straight up. You know, people say to me, what are you carrying on about? This is crazy. You can't uninvent what people know how to make. The nuclear technology is there. It's in people's minds. You can run around in these circles as much as you like, but you can't uninvent what people know how to do. So what do you say about that? I'll tell you what I say. I say, listen, in my travels, I've been to a lot of interesting museums, like especially in Europe, where you see, and like at the Metropolitan here on Fifth Avenue, you see suits of armor, you see swords, you see great big halberds, and, you know, crossbows, all these lethal weapons, right? Very deadly. And we can make them today. Who couldn't go out and make a suit of armor today? What we can do with metals and so on, okay? But what have we done with that stuff? We have put it on the museum shelf. And I contend we can do the same with nuclear weapons. We'll always be able to make them, but if we get smart and get our act together, we can put them nicely on the museum shelf. And I tell you what, if we change our thinking and we do that, generations in the future will go by and, like looking at suits of armor, they will say, gee, that's interesting, how quaint. But inwardly, in their hearts, they will say to themselves, what was wrong with those guys? You know, going around in suits of armor, going around with nuclear weapons. I mean, who ever thought of such stupidity? What a way to live.
But the reverse is true. If you don't do it, there may not be any place to go or visit, because nuclear proliferation basically takes the entire Earth and contaminates.
Well, that's what I'm worried about, is the extra systemic stuff, the people outside the system, the maverick states, you know, the 5 or 6 who've not come into the treaty and who are fiddling around on the side.
Who are they, by the way?
Oh, well, I mean, there's India, Pakistan, they're the two,
right,
you know, important ones, and of course North Korea, we recently had the problem. And, you know, that's what would be a bitter irony, real ashes in our mouth, you know. We get rid of the Cold War, the US and Russia are knocking off 2,000 nuclear weapons a year. You know, we are coming down. We're doing what people, men and women of goodwill around the world, have always wanted, and celebrate the end of the Cold War for making possible. What a bitter irony, okay? If while we do that, those of us who had this capability in a balanced and verifiable way where we can all have faith in it, get rid of that capability, only to witness some guys outside the system decide to get the bomb for themselves. And these are people who actually could, you know, almost would, you know, as a rule of thumb, you could say they have terrorist inclinations, for example. Now, you know, this is deeply disturbing. And as I say, it would be a real irony. And that's what this treaty seeks to prevent, by providing a universal regime where we're all doing the same thing and we're working towards a world where those weapons would be on the museum shelf.
Would you be criticized for being called naive because countries lie?
Yeah, I've heard about lying.
Countries lie, you know that, I know that.
People lie, they cheat.
And they run countries.
And they're greedy, right?
Right.
Let's talk about greed for a minute. It's really interesting. You asked the question, what happened after the end of the Cold War? What are the things that we've seen revealed, right?
Right.
Take Russia, for example. One of the most distressing things we've seen revealed is greed. One of the things we learn, you know, all those, the mafia in Moscow and so on, right?
Human nature.
Yeah, what do we learn? We learn that one of the things that got suppressed by a really lousy government was the opportunity of people to make a decent living. And so the first reaction to that we see is this really criminal way of trying to make a living, right? Yeah, I know about human greed. We all do. We know about lying and cheating. We all do. But what are you going to do about it? Like, take murder, for example. Okay? We've got a rule in most societies that says thou shalt not kill.
Right.
Yet murder occurs. Now, what's your response to it going to be? Right?
Mine?
Change the rule.
O.J. Simpson.
No. I mean, what is the sensible response to that? Because murder occurs occasionally.
You don't change the rules.
Do you say, well, we better change the rule that says thou shalt not kill? No. You take steps to ensure that the rule is broken as infrequently as possible. And it's the same with nuclear weapons. There are people who will try and cheat. There are people today who are trying to cheat. And by the way, some of them have been caught under the system of this treaty.
So what happens when they're caught?
They're stopped. North Korea was an example. Iran and Iraq have been examples. They have been stopped. But, you know, the real problem we've got in this context, too, is that you can't see what didn't happen.
Of
You know,
course.
there are many cases where the trail of technology and the motivation was there to make nuclear weapons and it never happened. But you can't put on the TV screen, here is a picture of what didn't happen. You don't see sometimes when the treaty worked. You don't, except in the intelligence files.
Right.
But I can tell you, Kennedy was right. There were 20 or 30 countries who would have gone nuclear. At the moment, you've got 5 who are legitimate nuclear states, and you've got another couple who have maybe got the bomb on the side. Now, that is a terrific track record. Let's call that 8 as against 172.
It's a win.
When it would have been 30 or 40 against 100.
Right. No, it's a win.
Now, it's a win.
Right.
That's not bad. Now, you don't throw out the basic rule, like murder, because someone commits a few murders. You try to make the system universal, and that's what we're trying to do.
All right, it's
with this
commendable
treaty.
what you're doing.
I reject utterly the charge then that says I'm naive. Not at all. I know about lying. I know about cheating. I know about greed.
Do people...
But I believe that you don't lay over. You don't roll over and just say, we can't beat it. You know, you use rational intellect, you use determination and commitment to make the system work, precisely because you know that, you know, greed and lying and cheating exists.
Do people ask you these questions?
Yeah, sure. And they asked me the question about how can you uninvent what's already been invented, and what about the bad guys on the block? What about lying and cheating? And I've given you my answers, and I think they're rational answers.
They're very rational. Problem is, not most people, some people are rational, some leaders are not rational.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. The preceding program was brought to you by Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.